Hello, everybody. So I wanted just to give a little introduction to the person I dialogued with today, or a couple days ago at this point, Leo Ferraro. So I met Leo Ferraro through John Vervaeke, and he's worked with John, and I think he mentioned he was a student of John Vervaeke, like years and years and years ago when he was in college. But since then, have worked together, and they've written a bunch of different papers and chapters to books. One is Relevance, Meaning, and the Cognitive Science of Wisdom. Another is Relevance Realization and the Neurodynamics and Neuroconnectivity of General Intelligence. Flow as Spontaneous Thought, Insight, and Implicit Learning. And Reformulating the Mindfulness Construct, the cognitive process at work in mindfulness, hypnosis, and mystical states. Some sexy titles there. What's interesting is reading this. This is these are pretty heavy topics, kind of technical, heavy topics as I'm reading them. However, it's interesting because the dialogue that we had, I found Leo to be incredibly personable, and even beyond personable, kind of speaking the wisdom that these titles point to, but with a kind of street smarts or something. We ended up talking a lot of this dialogue ended up being about love. I kept circling back to love, but not love like some romantic sense of the word, is like some kind of feeling that comes and goes, and in the romantic sense of the word, but more a embodied and acted relational love that comes through in how one sees someone when they're a teacher. Especially, we talked a lot about being a teacher, and his experience of being a teacher, his experience of being a parent, and what that's meant for him, and how they're connected, and what's behind that. So I really enjoyed my conversation with him. It's going to be the beginning of many, and I think I hope you enjoy it too. So as Leo as Leo told me afterwards, he likes to talk, and apparently he finds me incredibly easy to talk to. So I'm breaking this video up into two parts because it was over 2 hours long. And also, I think I may be doing that in the future with a lot of the dialogues, because I've gotten a lot of feedback that, these hour and a half or hour and a 40-minute conversations just looks daunting for people. So I think I'll probably just release videos that are longer from now on in two parts and just see how that goes. Okay, a couple of just also to let you know, a lot of you have written and asked me about this, so I would just announce it to everybody. The main course that I teach, the Art of Circling, which I created and teach and co-teach and co-create with my own co-founders of my company, which is a deep dive into the art of circling, and it's like a year long, and it's so if you're interested, hit the link below. I think that there's information down below, and that's coming up in March. So let me know if you want to talk about that. You just click the email, and there'll be ways to contact people for information about that. Also, I've been asked about just working with people one-on-one. If you're interested in that, just email me. My email's below as well. All right. Thank you. Enjoy.
With a recording at all.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's fascinating to me. So you just hopped on. We've never met, right?
No.
Until now, and you just hopped on the screen, and we're already talking about kids, and we're talking about it's really it's treacherous to try to decide to have kids. It was for me, and even after you have 3, and even after like having one to make a decision, make another. It's no more, it's no easier. But yet
No.
looking back, John and I were just talking about this actually. It's like looking back. When you look back, it looks like it's a straight line, right? But looking ahead, like, well, that wasn't the experience at the time. But then in retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, obviously it's destiny, or it's whatever word that we use for that experience.
Well, I mean, everything is a straight line after, right? I mean, you've developed, right? You've changed in such a way that now these things are sensible to you and whatever. So that's the end of history illusion, right? That's why we don't think we're going to change.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything seems so linear up to now. Oh, there we go. Like, this is all predictable. We don't see how much we've changed.
Right.
It's, I don't know. Like, all I can say is that for me, the decision hinged on looking at my life, looking at my wife, my new wife, and realizing that of all the things that I've done in my life, everything I've done in my life, the thing I do best is being a dad. And by far, the best thing I've ever done is be a dad.
Huh.
Hands down.
Huh.
That's and why wouldn't I do it more? You know, I mean, I think.
Wow, interesting.
It's a powerful feeling for me. Like, it's funny because I said I never thought I was going to be that guy who had kids at all, right? And I think that there's a certain amount of weirdo individualistic romanticism that infects us, and particularly guys in this regard. You've got this, I'm a lone wolf, I can't be tamed, blah blah blah, all this nonsense.
Right.
And we're very good at constructing idealized fantasies of self-sufficiency and going on your own and being like and so much of what we're raised with in terms of manhood is about that. It's about being a problem solver and a handler of things. And we're really oddly don't recognize enough or don't appreciate enough our paternal instinct as anything other than some sort of like badge or stamp. Yes, I was here. I procreated this many times, whatever. But the act of fathering, of being a father, it's the same way that I wouldn't have imagined having kids back years ago.
Yeah.
I now can't imagine not being a dad. I can't imagine not having been a teacher. I mean, these are just such basic pieces of who I am. Of course I was going to have more kids. Like, there's, what seems like a fraught decision at one hand, and the other is like, no. Like, right, of course, right. Like, this is who I am, right, Right. The best compliment I was ever paid by another person was actually by John. And we taught together at a private school. And it's funny because, I mean, there's lots of things that people would like to be complimented for. There's lots of things that, and I'm, I'm not lacking in vanity or conceit or any of these things. And so you would think that the best compliment I would have received would be like, Leo, you're such a badass, or you're so smart, or whatever. But John said to me, he says, you know what, Leo? He says, the thing that amazes me about you is you love better than anyone else I know. That's a really powerful thing to hear, because it's John was able to say that thing, which I guess made concrete something I'd thought of or hadn't grappled with explicitly yet. But that the thing that I have to offer, the thing that I give, is not academic. It's not, as a teacher, it's not even the let's say the domain specific knowledge that I'm imparting, but what I do in how I make, I guess, in the shelter I give my students, and the sort of the shelter is the best word I can think of right now. There isn't. I don't know if this is. Oh, it's most likely a flaw in my vocabulary, not the English language. Let's be real, but. I told you, I'm not without vanity, right? Like, but that thing that people don't really like. Teaching is an incredibly misunderstood thing, like an incredibly misunderstood thing as a profession, as a process, all of it. Like people really don't understand teaching or teachers. And even good teachers, even some of the best teachers don't understand what they're doing. I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I guess not everyone is predisposed to understanding the process. Like one of the reasons why I studied philosophy, among other things, is because it was very important to me to have some sense of why I believed the things that I believed. And I couldn't imagine why anyone wouldn't be deeply concerned with knowing that.
Yeah.
Turns out lots of people aren't. What are you going to do, right? That's not everyone. So fair enough. That's not a judgment. But likewise, when I do a thing, it's important to me to understand it. Not just, it would never be good enough for me to be good at a thing without understanding the whys and hows of a thing.
Right. Just
right.
real quick, when you're talking about, so like your first of all, when you said you were most moved by, all right, the best acknowledgement you ever had was by John.
Yeah.
What he's saying, like, of anybody, you like I remember you said, like, you love better than anyone else I know.
Yeah.
And that's like, that hit at a level like below vanity, that hit below like thought, that like truth to it, but it also called something deep in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time, right? And then you're talking about teaching, right?
Yeah.
And I sense that there's a connection between the teaching and the love and the way
of course.
Like there's like the knowledge in the domain of knowledge, right? And like knowing that stuff. And then as you started to talk about the like philosophy for you is like you want to understand intimately like the things that you believe, right? And just kind of like it's like a dumbfoundedness a little bit of like, why would anybody not? Like it just seems to make sense. Is there a connection between the love and the understanding? Like just sitting with you just right now, I just get this sense of like when John, like when you said that, obviously I don't know you.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the longest I've known.
First conversation.
Yeah, totally. But I totally get hit with the sense of what John's talking about, right? And when like whatever sense was that I was hit with, that I don't quite have any, I don't quite understand, but I just felt like, oh yeah, I could get how that's true, and I don't know why. And then when you were talking about like understanding, I still had the same sense.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you make sense of my experience with you so far? Basically, that's what I'm asking you.
No, this is cool. I mean, look, you come highly recommended, right? Yeah. John likes you a lot. He speaks very highly of you. That's worth a lot to me. I don't feel this is quite a naive first meeting for me. Maybe I have an undue advantage because I've gotten to see you interact. So, also though, I mean, and this is related to this, and I think related to what John said is, intimacy is easy for me. Yeah. Like I connect with people readily. Yeah. And generally fairly quickly. Not everyone, to my regret, chagrin, and occasional disadvantage. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. But for the most part, I don't have a problem. More than not have a problem. I find it easy to connect with people. But I think that comes, it's not an instrumental thing. Yeah. I actually just genuinely like people. Yeah. Well, I think that's like that. When you said that, I was like, that makes sense when you said intimacy, because it's like, oh yeah, you just hopped on and you're like, as if you've been sitting in front of each other for like 10 years or something. It seems like in your just given responsiveness here, it's funny. It's like, I don't feel super self-conscious, and you don't seem at all self-conscious. It's just kind of like you assumed relatedness that I found myself inside of with you and sharing with you, such that when you said like, oh yeah, love,
I was like, why does that make sense? And I think it's making sense.
I mean, but that was, I think, my greatest strength as a teacher,
Yeah.
because that's a thing, and again, it comes from a genuine place. But I have even to this day, I mean, I don't actively teach in a classroom anymore, but to this day, I have a profound sense of connection, of fondness, of love for my students.
Oh,
They're still in touch with me, many of them, and it's um, it's
yeah.
I think it's possible to be a good teacher and not love your students. I imagine that it's possible to be a, like, let's say, a pure pedagogical technician.
Mm-hmm.
I have to count that that's a possibility,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I have no personal experience of that. I also can't imagine it other than purely propositionally. Like, um,
Huh.
it's,
Huh.
I mean, the beauty, the thing about love and understanding, the connection there is, love is the thing that lets you dare to understand something completely and
Yeah.
with all of its flaws.
Yeah.
Because you, like, without that powerful orienting motivation towards a thing, right? You find out something about someone or a thing that's repulsive or repellent or whatever, pushes you away, right? As a teacher, you need to be unconditionally dedicated, motivated towards your student,
Right.
right? And
Right.
teaching is, in my view, like, there's sort of like two valid, non-parasitic, non-evil,
Yeah.
intransitive human relationships, that is, or non-reciprocal human relationships,
Yeah.
right? Where they're not only not reciprocal, they shouldn't be reciprocal, right? And that's parenting and teaching,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Totally.
I'm there for my kids. My kids have no reason to be there for me whatsoever. There should never be a situation upon which I'm relying on them,
Right. Right.
right? Like, the kids need to be free to be kids and to be growing, right? There's no, and likewise with your
I've
student.
had enough therapy from that not being the case to know how needed that is.
Well,
Me.
well, let's go, but this is just it, right? And teachers as well, right? I mean, you need to have that thing where you are purely there for them, and there's no, I mean, it's lovely when your students appreciate you're the grateful. That's beautiful. That's lovely. I think it's great, right? But I'm never owed that. No one's owed that. No one should expect that, and it's not a thing that you should get too comfortable with or about, because also, as a teacher, you're not someone's friend. Much like a parent, you are acting to their best interest at a time when they are incapable of grasping their best interest
Right.
developmentally, right? I mean,
Right.
part of your job as a parent or as a teacher is you're being a prosthetic frame problem solver,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, you know, like, you have to help get kids along on those decisions, on those choices and those modes of being that are purely aspirational. There is no rational step-by-step way that you can say, this is why you should do this or why you should do like that.
Right.
I've said to students before, I've said, look, I'm going to have to ask you just to take this on faith.
Yeah.
Like, what we're talking about here is not an amount of smarts thing. It's a kind of smarts thing. All right. You're about to do something that in 5 years, you're going to kick yourself in the ass for.
Right.
Okay.
Totally.
I can't provide you a logical, if P then Q argument for this. All right. I can just tell you that you are going to regret this. Right.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, please just take my word for this, do this. And I feel gratified that in most cases they listened.
Okay, so if I just want to pause right there. So I think what you just said just strikes me as quite profound, right? So it's like when you said, I can't propositionally lay out for you, right? Like, what I heard in that is, even if I could,
Yeah.
this isn't probably why you would not want to do it, right?
Right.
There's something I'm present to here.
Yeah.
You're just gonna have to. I'm just ask you to take it on faith.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining what you mean by like love, right? And your students, right? And relating in your students, right? In the way that you just have a kind of intimacy, right? It's not a mutual, like, just same level of intimacy. There's a structure there, right? You're not in the
Of
sense of
course.
needing things from them, but there's a relationality that's just innate for you in teaching and so crucial. And I just got the sense of for them, what gives them make gives the intelligence to respond to what you said and to take it as faith. I'm imagining is very connected to like the way that you've related to them up to that point, the kind of trust.
Sure. Well,
What would you say about that?
I mean, I don't know, because
Uh-huh.
for the most part, my students trust me. I would love to say that it's because I'm eminently trustworthy,
Yeah.
but that's also, that's also sorcery. That's weirdosity. That's like, oh, like I'm somehow radiating the contents of my heart. That's garbage. what
Yeah.
what I is the way
Yeah.
I have the way I am. It seems to evoke a positive response. Um, on the occasions where, let's say, that faith was tested, I've generally succeeded, or I've done the right thing, or I've done the appropriate thing,
Yeah.
and that works. I'm also going to say that for all that I'm someone who's in most of my academic career has been around teaching, right? Like, I understand very well how learning works and all of this stuff, but there's also
Mm-hmm.
um, okay, sorry, I'm losing my thread a little bit and trying to tie overly ambitiously, I think, a lot of things together.
Yeah, there's like a lot.
um,
There's a lot of different threads, but like I couple of things. I'm sensing what you're talking about in the way that you are talking about it, right?
sure.
There's a sense of like you're already grappling with it, right? You're
Yeah.
already okay. What, like, in a certain sense, this is what I'm talking. Like, there's a way that you're moving your hands and you're moving around, and it's funny because John had mentioned like the way that you guys work together is, one of the things he says, like, with most people, I'm like the one walking around. I could totally see that. Not, like the other people, the ones that are typing or whatever, and he says, but now with Leo, like Leo, especially in the beginning, Leo's the ones walking around, and I was like, I have a hard time. I hadn't met you yet, but now I get the sense. I really get that sense of.
Well, you're just lucky that I'm confined between this in the small space, because
Yeah.
I'd actually contemplated that when we were going to do this before. I was thinking I'd just do this in the kitchen, and we would do this while I was making dinner or something, because I'm very
Right.
kinesthetic. Like,
Yeah.
I move. I do like my best thinking moving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just that's who I am. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, no, with John, it is funny because John is an incredibly animated lecturer, but when John and I, or John and whenever like this group was working, I'm inevitably the one pacing around the table and like lunging and doing all this sort of stuff, and
I really get it.
engaging in performance art. That's the part that I was going to say. Yay, I remembered the phrase.
Yes.
I'm going to say that for all that I can talk about the technical, psychological, neuroscientific nature of learning this and that and the other, I can also freely say that a good significant percentage of successful teaching is performance art, right? It's how you present yourself and what you do. So, and sometimes it's natural and sometimes it's calculated. I would, for example, try and deliberately to get laughs at certain beats in a lecture or a lesson, because that would generate more paths back to that insight so that people have it more accessible later. It's not a big deal, but it's something that works, right? The more you make the moment salient, the more that stuff is accessible for later access.
Right.
And sort of, you frame it in odd ways. You do like so there's a little bit of sort of stand-up comedy riffing. There's all sorts of stuff, but that performance aspect is important, and I think that that's something that I have a certain amount of untutored sort of innate facility with.
Mm.
And I don't want to confuse that with some sort of like magic empathic bond. So I'm lucky that I have a number of features that make me likable to teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That have nothing to do with my sincerity, with my intentions, with my whatever. Right.
Right.
I'm like 6'3". I'm bald. I'm a relatively well-built guy. I always taught self-defense and hand-to-hand combat as part of the curriculum. So like, and I have that in me. I'm not shy about the mistakes I've made in my life or that stuff. So there's a sense of connectedness that happens quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that, by and large, teenagers respond well to.
Yeah.
It's not like that's not magic, and it's not anything even that deep, right? It's just a matter of using what's there.
Yeah.
Like John definitely has a superpower around teaching, because John is somehow able to communicate his passion for philosophy to people that no one would have any right to expect would care about it.
Right.
And he has a tremendously high success rate at that. Like it's he's not universally beloved per se, but no one is. But the rate at which, and especially when you factor in the difficulty, because lots of people can make a teenage kid like Kung Fu. Kung Fu is intrinsically likable to teenage kids, right?
Yeah.
But epistemology,
right?
I mean, most adults couldn't give a rat's patoot about epistemology.
Right.
But almost unfailingly, every high school student John has had their life path deviated towards philosophy, at least to some degree. Right. And that's the power of his sincerity and his passion.
Yeah.
Right. I luckily have some parlor tricks that I'm, able to do that allow me to be a reasonably good teacher as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be clear about that, because I mean, I don't want to conflate two things, right? I did have that sincere affection, concern for my kids. Like I said, there've certainly been instances that have clearly proven that, borne that out. I think it's helped. Certainly the kids appreciated it. But the initial thing, if I have to be honest, is mostly charisma, right? Of some form. There's a general likability, right?
Right.
And I mean, so again, and not to like also like sprain my arm patting myself on the back, or I'm just trying to be honest with how and where things happen. Right?
So basically what you're saying is like I don't want to like put off the impression, or it's not true. Like I'm out of virtue this way in all respects, because I love the kids. There's a way that you were born this way. You have a certain temperament, right? Yep. Like history, and it happens to really like work when it comes to teaching.
Yeah.
So it's like not necessarily like a deep, some of that stuff isn't necessarily like a deep thing, although it has a deep impact.
Yeah.
What is the part for you? What is the part for you that is deep, is virtuous? What is the part for you that is like something that like it's between you and yourself and your reality, it's like it's something that you cultivate, or it's not just given. What is that? Is it what is that? What do you say?
I don't know. I mean,
frame it that way.
Yeah, no. I mean, the fact is I cultivate all of it at this point, right? That's something that, I mean, they feed each other. The sort of, let's say the understanding and the being, right? So, when you realize that the gift you're giving is love, right? Yeah. When you realize that, okay, so that's the thing, that's the let's say the motivational bullet casing that carries this. You learn to be better at it, right? You realize, okay, so then, right, and then what does it mean to love? Well, okay, there's these different kinds of love, and there's this, and there's the other, right? And you formulate your ethic of non-reciprocity, right? And then you go further, and you go, okay, so is it all right to go with your first impressions? Or do you owe all of these kids everything you have, regardless of how you feel about them when you first meet them, right? And that's the thing that you have to go through, and you go, okay, all right, so maybe person X isn't as immediately likable.
And what was that like? What was it like going through that and coming to that? Like, was it like
you feel bad for the people you let down in the
past? Or like, what was it like for you?
Like I said, you feel bad for the people you may have let down in the past, and you try harder to be that much better for the people in your future. And
yeah,
I mean, there's this idea that love is masterless. It's just this thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's this force, and it's fruitless to do anything other than submit to it, to try and understand it. It's a mistake. To try and bend it or shape it's a mistake. And I think that's one of the most hurtful things we've internalized as a culture.
Right.
I think that we owe it to ourselves to love as well as we can. In fact, I think it's kind of it's becoming a matter of survival. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that we all feel differently about things, and the way that we find these isolated nodes that are so set against each other. And it's like, it's not that disagreement is fundamentally bad, quite the opposite. Disagreement's essential also for growth and development. Opponent processing is everything. Without that, there is no development, there is no growth. It's the opponent processing is the mathematical engine that drives complexification, that allows for growth, development, and expansion of capacity and capability. But that opponency has to happen in some mutual framework. There has to be some machinery keeping it together. Otherwise, it all flies apart.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, as we get to the point where our intellect becomes an increasingly terrifying force multiplier, when the consequences of the game of human interaction grow so much, it becomes that much more important to recognize that you have to ground things in love, that love is that basis, that love is the medium that keeps these things together. It's the part where you can even, it allows you to ignore evidence. It allows you to ignore things that are pushing you away from someone, to go, no, they're still with me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so you're saying it's like what I'm hearing the virtuous, like I'm hearing love is both, I'm hearing it as is both a virtue, right? It's also that which calls me to have the virtue.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, that seems good. I mean, I'm riffing here, and the beauty of this sort of interaction is that, I mean, I don't think I've said many of these words before, or even expressed many of these propositions before. Like, this is provoked by the conversation. This is why I like dialogue. This is why I like this sort of thing, because I do. Totally. It's how you excavate yourself, right? It's how you take what you have and you, and of course, right, things that are in your head you think are sensible, but they're not. Yeah. Like, anyone who has thought they were profound while they were smashed on something and has written down can tell you how lame just being yourself is. You know what I mean? Just doing it on your own. Like, you get this page of utter nonsense. You're like, oh my Lord, I'm a cretin, right? But somehow when you talk to someone, you're a genius. It's amazing. Like, all this stuff, right? Like this is what Vygotsky was talking about, right? Like, Vygotsky thought of intelligence in a number of different ways. And there was certainly, there was the G, the internal this, right? But there's a way in which there's a synergy in people interacting that's different. And I'm not talking about Gardner's multiple intelligence. I'm not talking about interpersonal intelligence. I'm talking about the synergy of a dynamical system of opponent process, because even though we're of like minds in the sense that we're both predisposed to having this conversation, right? Yeah. What's making this move is the opponency.
Yeah, that we're others. Right, there's another.
Not just that we're others.
Yeah.
you're provoking, right? Like
Yeah.
you're asking a question and you're aiming them, right?
Yeah.
You're not aiming them for my mitt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Right?
Totally.
I
Yeah.
got to move. I got to like it's and so when that's done skillfully, that's what the Socratic method is,
Right.
right? Because then you don't just move someone to the right for no reason, right? What you do is you move them in a way that suddenly they realize the value of this or that. Like it's
Yeah.
you're trying to create. It's not good enough to create aporia, right? You have to create them at critical spaces. You have to create it where insight's provoked,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Totally.
That's the skill in being a good interlocutor. That's where, again, in throwing it, right?
Yeah.
Not just to make the person dance like a monkey, right?
Yeah. Totally.
but,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
to lead it somewhere, right?
Absolutely. So
That's
that's
what teaching
it's
is.
like that's I'm sensing the midwifery part of it. Like there's a quality, because for me it's like it's a God. It's got so much, like doing this for with circling. There's a lot of like really really deeply getting people that have those Socratic circles and coming around to it. It's funny. It's more like, I think as time has gone on, the thing that doing that like over and over and over again has, I think you're right. It's there is a quality of love about it that does it calls me.
Well, but why else would you do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why else would you do it?
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely. But those moments of those key moments that you're talking about of like timing and the right pressure and the right like opposition or the right space, that whole thing, I've really appreciated like understanding more of like listening as midwifery, right? This kind of quality of like a midwife.
absolutely.
Like a midwife is a different, people get midwives, right? And I'll never forget this because I've been in two births, my son's birth and then one of my best friends at the time's birth.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a midwife and then she had to go to the hospital,
Yeah.
right? And it was so clear that and the midwife went with us to the hospital.
Yeah.
And the midwife was still midwiferying as the birth at the hospital was happening, but it wasn't what the doctors were doing.
Yeah.
And I think what that difference was is that she was becoming impregnated in a certain sense with the process, and kind of like being impregnated with the birthing baby, right? In a certain sense, she became the womb, right?
Yeah.
In that, like, to receive the baby, to then turn it, like, give it back to the mother. That wombing, that kind of spacious, proactive vulnerability, that like kind of like staying at the edge of something, all of that does, it's funny now that you're talking about it, it does feel like that is deeply revealed and taught me how to love.
Well, but that's just it, right? I mean, if you, because it's not just the doing, right? Like it's not just the questions. It's like you said, the listening is the spaces you create, the affordances, right?
Yeah.
The way you shape that space is as important as the provocations you make, right? We were lucky in that my wife chose to have a midwife, and we had a very good midwife for my last child, and a doula.
Right.
The doula involved a midwife, and
what's the difference between a doula and a midwife? Doula is
the midwife does a lot more of the quasi-medical stuff.
Okay.
Like the midwife is concerned a lot with the baby, right? And I think the doula is more concerned with the woman's experience of pregnancy and getting through pregnancy. Yeah. And I mean, and that, like, wiki that shit after, because I am not an expert. So
wiki that shit.
like, don't take my word for it, right? I'm just giving you my best sense of this.
Right.
But one thing that I've learned about myself is I have a very authoritative way of speaking, and people often want to believe what I say and often take what I say seriously.
Yeah.
And I am so stupid. No one should take me completely. Right? So I feel the need
Right.
to just say that sometimes and go, and by the way, like,
Wiki that shit, right?
yeah, exactly. Like, just, if I haven't provided you a citation, go check for sources.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm a skeptical person, and I'm not one of these like jerk online skeptics who are like out to get some sort of like ego stroke by dropping a ton of logical fallacies on someone's head. I care about my epistemic hygiene, and
Yeah.
and as I said, I like to know why I believe things.
Yeah.
Right. So that and again and it's troubling to me, like, the sort of both the lack of criticism people bring to bear and the absurd criticism people bring to bear. Like, people seem to be only capable, or not only all people. I often see, the extreme sort of warped versions of criticism and skepticism, and not enough like a useful one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was, I will admit to having not had a very strong, a very positive notion or thought of, feeling for midwives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Midwife came over for an appointment, which already put her in my good books, right? Like, it made my wife's life easier. She came over and we had a conversation, and the woman's knowledge was encyclopedic. She's just brilliant. It's like, oh crap. Like, okay, you win. You know what you're doing. Like, let's go, right? The doula as well. Like, these were like learned, intelligent, thoughtful people.
Yeah.
I have no like reservations anymore after that, right? And especially being there and seeing how utterly ineffectual my presence was at the birth. Do you know what I mean? Like, my wife could hold my hand, she could squeeze my hand, I was there for her, right? But I lacked the kind of love that you have for your wife is different than the love the midwife has for your wife. Okay? And the midwife can love your wife through the most horrible pain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? And love your wife in a way that says, no, you got to feel this way a bit longer. You can do this, right? And I am a blubbering pile of shit, and I'm willing to jump out the window to end my wife's suffering. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
But I mean, that's
something you don't have to wiki. We can just take that as true. Right.
I like you realize then, right? But again, it comes down to love. Like, that's you can't be a midwife without loving that person. I mean, not liking them, you can dislike them immensely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about love. You can dislike the fuck out of whoever it is that you love, right? But you still love them, right? Totally. And that's important. It's important to keep these things right, and you still have that ability, right, to maintain a powerful motivational framework oriented towards that person's greater good.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what.
Yeah, totally.
It's I mean, it also helped me mediate with the kids themselves more than once, right? I mean, you've got a kid who's not doing well with the other kids, and there's some, bullying or about to be bullying, and it's like, you can be frank. It's like, just, you can help this kid integrate. You can also help these kids who are being jerks to not be jerks. The important thing is to realize, as unlikable as bullying is, as viscerally unappealing as it is, right? When it's kids doing it, you don't owe them moral judgment. You owe them teaching, because they're kids. Because of course they're not doing it right. Because kids don't do anything right. Totally. That's why they're kids.
And when I'm kind of like, it's funny, as you're walking, like on some level, this is just like, it's kind of, it strikes is like people, I can imagine people say like, oh yeah, of course it's obvious. So that's what you do. Well, as you've been walking through it, I was struck. I found myself in the observation of the switch from like, you don't make them wrong. You aren't disgusted with them. No, you see like, there's a place that you're holding as a teacher, right?
Yeah.
That not only just knows that they're kids, therefore they need to learn, but like on some of, I saw myself as you're describing it and listening to you, I saw myself seeing like a future in the kid, something that's transcendent in the kid that they can't know about, but I can actually see. And I would imagine my degree of being able to see that, right?
Yeah.
Is part of the thing that grows you as a teacher, I would imagine. Or
Yeah.
one of the things that is evidence of that you're growing as a teacher is like, you're not like just tolerating them and then remembering that they're just kids. It's like, no, you see them bullying, but you also see this possibility within them and are able to like relate to the bullying and that frame all in once, right?
You see the person, you see their future self in peril.
Yeah.
Right? And you're rescuing their future self. You're doing the same way that you can improve your ability to instill, for example, healthy habits yourself. So the way that one of the techniques that allows you to combat temptation in the moment,
yeah,
right, is to create a personal relationship between you today and you in the future, right? To literally engage in the exercise of creating in your head, there's future me, and having a conversation, instantiating a model of yourself and having a conversation, allowing yourself to love that person and to feel responsibility for them, right? And it's just as important to go back as future you and thank yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you create and you remember yourself and you go, thank you for that. Creating that personal relationship is one of the things that lets you transcend hyperbolic discounting and stuff like that, that lets you offset all the things that allow bad habits, right?
Right.
You don't just have to do that with yourself. You can do that with anyone.
Yeah.
Right?
Huh.
So you don't just feel like your student isn't this kid now, right? This is a life, right? This is a future. This is a parent. This is everything, right? There's a universe of possibilities that you have a hand in shaping, right? And of course, so because in the moment we can all be hideously unlikable, right? Obviously you can't rely on that,
right?
That's empty, right?
Yeah.
So of course you create those models, not just of the person then, but who are they going to be? What are they? And of course this behavior in the moment, that makes it so much easier to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you can't help everyone. You don't connect with everyone. It's not perfect. Some people are well beyond your ability to affect. Some kids who bully are destined to be monsters, right? But you know what? They've got plenty of time to be monsters. You can do your best now.
Right.
Right. You still do your best now.
Yeah. I'm just really appreciating what you're saying. I'm having quite an experience just talking about this and what's kind of coming to light for me, that I think, which is often the case in these kinds of conversations, right? It's funny because it's evoking a sense of like affinity and love for you and but also this sense of,
sorry, just giving my wife some paper.
Okay. Right. Give her our love.
Yeah, always.
Yes. This sense of, I've been really fortunate to have a number of teachers throughout my life since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I kind of come from an addictive family background and a lot of things that come with that. But I had a grandfather who was like this wise, old, awesome guy that would tell me story after story after story, that in some way I feel like him.
That is white paper.
This is lined paper.
Oh, I'm sorry. One moment.
Got it.
Oh, goodness me, that is lined paper. My apologies.
Just pull it out of the printer.
I guess so. There you go, baby. Sorry.
I don't need that much. I just need.
All right. There we go. I had foolishly provided lined paper instead of plain white paper. And the lighting is such that it was difficult to tell.
Got you.
All right, I'm yours again. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. I think I was just having this experience of like, as you were, which is often the case I've noticed, like with insights, is one, it seems to evoke this quality of insight, has this quality of this, it has love involved, right? That just seems to be part of the experience, like insights, like, whoa. And then I notice I get a new history out of it, right? I'm going back right now, and I'm recalibrating, if you say, or re-seeing that all of the men and women in my life that just kind of, in a certain sense, took me under their wing, like hearing us talk about, like, oh, being able to see, right? Like, this is part of the love. I'm imagining this is like, I know we can talk about this too, but like the notion, like the distinction agape, right?
Yeah.
But being able to see, I'm just seeing more clearly, like that like seeing, it's not just seeing me now, it's seeing me, the potential of me in the future, the past, right? Like it's.
Well, both are deeply relevant, right? Because what happened to you in the past has everything to do with what you're doing now, right? And what you're doing now goes into who you're going to be in the future. But no one moment, the beauty of it is no one moment is defining or damning. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like,
yes,
there's this weird pervasive transience to the whole thing. When you let go of this sort of weird Cartesian need for an unchanging, persistent core, right? When you let that go and you realize that you can be whatever, do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's very freeing.
Yeah.
Right? But it's freeing in so many ways, because then you don't need to, like, when you can let go of that essentialism, right? It makes it easier to both to love and to be lovable.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Because then hate, like serious antipathy becomes like trying to like hold, sand in your fist, right? As Leah says to Veda, right? Or will slip through your fingers, right? It's just, you can just, I always felt that beauty couldn't exist without impermanence. That impermanence is an essential piece of a thing being beautiful. It has to end in some way, right? That's what we are. It's great because who we are moment to moment is different, right? This you right now is gone and gone forever, in a few moments.
And
right?
part of the beauty is I've always noticed about beauty, it does have its like really intense beauty. If like you feel into it, has a quality or a tinge of sadness.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's an important lesson to learn. I mean, I think that, again, beauty is misunderstood in our culture, and the way, again, it's beauty is a thing that we attribute to objects or even to people in a very superficial way that's just mistaken. Like, again, a turn of phrase that John used once that I really stuck with me was the notion of being tempted by the good. Right? It's a great thing.
There's a
Safrason.
Yes.
Yeah. But for me, like I said, it was specifically tempted by the good, because it's a wonderful thing. Because temptation, temptation is being pulled towards doing something wrong, right? It's not a temptation if the goal, the act, or the acquisition isn't in some way bad, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why? Why does that have to be, right? What is it? Like, there's nothing intrinsic to the Mars bar. It doesn't radiate temptons, right? You know,
Yeah.
there's some sort of quantum resonance there. It's like, must eat Mars bar, right?
Right.
Everything that attracts me to the Mars bar is in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely everything
Yeah.
is in my head,
Uh,
right? For that.
uh,
So, you know, beauty is in our heads,
yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
means we own it, which means we're responsible for it to
Yeah.
some degree,
Yes.
right? And so while you don't go around castigating people for not having, I don't know, not finding person or thing X, Y, or Z specifically beautiful, right? There's a sense in which we owe it to ourselves to cultivate our sense of beauty. Like
Mm,
aesthetics is a woefully ill-treated
yeah.
discipline. Like when they say the true, the good, and the beautiful,
Mhm.
right? As these titles, you understand that they're meant to be linked. Those are meant to be educated,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You have to be able to discern the truth,
Yes.
right? Truth doesn't just deliver itself to you. Anything that's delivered truth is garbage, right? It's someone trying to sell you something. if, there's,
Yeah.
if there's no discernment, there is no truth,
Uh,
right? Truth must be discerned, all right?
yeah.
And the truth helps you realize what is good,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And if you do things right, beauty helps you because you find the good beautiful,
Right. Yes.
right? You learn to find the good beautiful is how you become tempted by the good,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then truth, beauty, and good
Oh, so it's
become,
salient. It's like I was just
yeah,
thinking in the sense of like what's salient of the like it's like it has this thing that they were talking about before, which is yeah, when I'm able to look at my student and really see the student to be a teacher,
yeah,
right, is to see not just the student in front of me, not just the act that they did, but like to see more like horizons of temporality that give the ground and being able to respond to it. So it's like with the Mars bar is only like beautiful to the degree when I don't include like the sugar crash and how fat I'll get from it and like all of the craving and all if I don't see that, right, the Mars bar will crave. But if I do see that, right,
it becomes less beautiful.
less beautiful, and therefore what it becomes less salient to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can make other things beautiful. Like, I mean, people used to study music appreciation.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second, right? Because on one hand, oh, you can't teach that. It's like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
You can learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't do enough of that. That's not an important enough piece of our education. We allow domain-specific experts to develop appreciation, right? Like there's music for musicians,
Mm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
love music for musicians. That's so illuminating, that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so when I was growing up, I had a bunch of friends who were really into guitar. Now, I can't carry a tune in a lead bucket. And I mean, I played recorder in grade 4 like every other kid in my, with, you know, in my context. But I'm not a musician by any stretch, but I love music.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I had a bunch of friends who were into guitar, and I ended up listening to a bunch of bands and musicians who were not widely appreciated, let's say, by all sundry. They were music for musicians.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, that stuff. And I mean, some of it's found more mainstream success, but I mean, so like if you're a guitar player, right?
Yeah.
At least back in my day, which is, we won't give a specific date because that would just be shameful and embarrassing. You know, Yngwie Malmsteen was like a big deal, right?
Huh?
A Swedish guitar player who, you know, could play 23 notes per second. The guy could just shred like crazy, right? You know, Joe Satriani, who actually goes on the G3 tour every year. He's very successful. He's seen a much more sort of broader audience, you know. Steve Vai, was both commercially successful, but also is absolutely a musician's musician, right?
Right.
I feel, I see that, and I have this tiny window, and I'm like, wow, we should all have this. We should all be able to see this, right?
Yeah.
You know, inevitably, a guitar player is going to appreciate guitar differently than me. I get that, right? But I can certainly get close.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can get closer to that. Cultivating our aesthetic sensibilities is an important skill, right? Both for enjoying our lives, for appreciating, but also I think like deeply crucial, because that is how, you know, that is how we can bring beauty back into the true and the good picture, right? Because
Right.
otherwise it's a pretty Spartan, not cool thing, right? I mean, without the beauty part, we're creating like the Spock fallacy, right? This idea that, you know, we can either enjoy our lives or we can like be dedicated to truth, right? And it's like, that's garbage,
Right. Right.
right?
Totally.
Like that's just silly. I mean, it's not true in any sense of it, but it's this cartoon of wisdom, this cartoon of rationality that sort of pervade, that people like, and it feeds the worst part of us. Like, that's the problem, right? It balms a hurt that people feel about not being included, about this, about whatever, but it doesn't balm it by bringing them back in, by helping them connect, but by justifying their separation.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? I
Mm.
see, you are right. You are better than they are.
Mm.
Right?
Right.
It's pornography, right? I mean, that's kind of what pornography is, right? It's got nothing specific to do with lurid sex or whatever. It's getting that cheap gratification without having earned, having gone through, having, right?
Right.
It's the rewarding of our basest impulses, right?
It kind of like it requires the giving up of agency or sovereignty in the act. I think wasn't it James Joyce had a lot to say about this, that sense of where talking about I think it was Joyce that was talking about the difference between like pornography and,
Right.
and fine art. And he said, like, with fine art, find something about something really artful is that it seems to create this space of reflection, right? That isn't immediately intelligible, but draws in a mutual intelligibility, right? That evokes a participation. Whereas with and I think Weber was it the sociologist Weber who then kind of took that, and this is where he thought it was really television was dangerous, because it says it removes, his thought was it removes that space of reflection.
Yeah.
So you literally get taken on this ride, right?
Yeah.
Where it's and then you get taken off, and there's no, you didn't have any of that kind of sense of having to grapple and articulate and to see and to struggle, right?
There's no reaching.
Yeah.
It's like being spoon-fed, right?
Yeah, totally.
You know, instead of here's a meal that you then that you eat, right? It's here you go, right? Every bite cut for you, everything just handed over to you. There's no effort, there's no nothing. It's just pure sensation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Sensation void of perception.
Yes.
Right? That's I mean, this is why, like, I joked, I talk about confirmation porn, right? Like the way in which, you know, we love to read things that tell us what we know already. I make it a point, for example, like if you're reading something and if you're not disagreeing with it, all right, or learning something for the first time, then you're wasting your time.